In this video, we're going to be learning about tax tip and markup, finding the amount of each of those. So let's go over what each of them are. Sales tax, that would be the additional amount of money charged on items people buy. Like when you go to the store and the price tag says $15.95, you don't just pay $15.95, you pay more than that because there's a sales tax added on. Then you have a tip that you leave when you are provided with a service, like a waiter, waitress, when you get your hair cut. Again, that's an additional amount of money that you pay for your service. Then you have markup, and markup is an amount that something is increased. For example, when a store buys a product, they buy them in large quantities, so it costs them less. But when they put it on their shelf to sell, they charge people more than what they originally paid for, so that would be considered a markup. Now, before we get into the main problems, I want to go back over again finding percent of a number. We did that the other week when we did circle graphs, but we have two options for finding percent of a number. The proportion method that we've been using, which is the part over the whole equals percent over 100. The example that I came up with was, what is 5% of 128? So the part is we don't know that, so that would be x over of the whole amount, 180, equals 5 over 100. And we solve that proportion like we normally do, and you would end up with x equals 6.4. Now for the equation method, some of you have already figured this out, but if we think about it, we're trying to find the percent of a number. And when we do that, that's finding the part of the whole amount, because the percent is a part. Setting up the equation with the example that I've used, so it says percent of a number. So that means we're going to find 5% of the number 128. Well, now here's the thing. You need to know that the of translates into a multiplication symbol. So basically, you're doing 5% times 128. Now, I wrote it this way, 5% times 128, because next year on the Inspire calculators, or some of you already have it now, you can put in a percent sign in your calculator and it changes it out for you. But since you may be using a regular calculator or just by hand multiplication, 5% needs to be changed to its decimal form first. And to change a percent to a decimal, you move your decimal 2 places to the left. So basically, this is saying 0.05 times 128. So then we would calculate that and find out that x equals 6.4. Moving on to the examples for finding the amount of tax tip or markup, we have the first example that says a graphing calculator costs $90 and the sales tax is 8%. So we're trying to find 8% of $90. So part A says, what is the amount of tax for this calculator? So that's why we're going to find 8% of 90. Now remember, your percent needs to be changed to a decimal, so move your decimal 2 places to the left, making it 0.08. Of translates to times and 90. And when I calculate 0.08 times 90, I end up with 7.2, but since this is talking about money, I'm going to make it look like money with 2 numbers after the decimal place. That was how you would solve the problem with the equation method, but I know some of you are more comfortable solving as proportions, so I'm also going to set this up as a proportion. If I do so, it's going to be the x, because that's the part that we're going to calculate, out of the whole. $90 is the whole, and then 8, which since this is in the proportion, you don't have to change the percent to a decimal, out of 100. Then I would solve this, and I end up with x equals $7.20 tax. Now the second part of this question is then asking, are you going to add or subtract with the original amount? So tax, as it's set up above, it's the additional amount you have to pay. So that means you're going to add your tax onto the original price of $90. Moving along to the next problem. Now, before I do, I wrote up at the top that for tax, I'm going to add. So moving on to a tip question. Kristen and her parents went out to dinner. Their bill for dinner came out to be $45. If they leave a 15% tip, how much money should they leave for the tip? Part A says how much is the tip. So we're going to find 15% of $45. I will change the 15% to a decimal, move my decimal 2 places to the left, so that's going to turn into 0.15 of is going to become multiply. And so 0.15 times 45 will equal $6.75. So $6.75 is what they're going to leave for the tip. So will you add or subtract with the original? Well, tip is the additional money you leave for the server after you have a meal. Therefore, you are going to add. So let me write that little note up here as well. For tip, we're going to add. Now, as you can see, I did set this problem up as a proportion for those of you that like the proportion, so you can check yourself if that's how you would like to set it up. Moving on to the last kind of question, a markup. Well, a markup says Foot Block just received a shipment of sneakers. They paid $48 for each pair of sneakers, but they sell them at a 25% markup. How much is the markup amount? Well, let's find out. We want to figure out what 25% of $48 is. And I know I keep repeating, but the percent in the equation setup needs to be changed to a decimal. So move our decimal 2 places to the left. That would give us 0.25. The word of in this situation translates to a multiplication and 48. So 0.25 times 48 is going to equal $12. So they mark up their sneaker price by $12. They pay $48, but then you pay $12 more. So since you're going to pay $12 more, that means that this is going to get added. So far we have tax, tip, and markup all are getting added on to your original amount. You can see again, I did set up the proportion for those of you that prefer the proportion. Now before I finish up, I want to just quickly make a little note. So if you set this up as an equation, it's going to be the percent in decimal form times the whole original number. And if you set it up as a proportion, it's going to be x over the whole original equals the percent over 100. Now remember, if you use the proportion, the percent does not need to be in a decimal form. So in this video, you figured out how to find a percent of a number using an equation method, a proportion method. We also talked about tax, tip, and markup, and we know that for each of those, after you figure out the percent that they are, you're going to add onto the original amount. Hope this video helps, and let me know if you have any questions.